Hey guys, it's been a long time since the last video I put out. I've been up to a lot. Me and the wife moved into a new house, and also I just got done with extension season for taxes, which was October 15th. I'm going to just get straight into it. Today's video is going to be over the PPP loan forgiveness application. And before we get into it, just to clarify, not all lenders are accepting, not all banks are accepting the forgiveness application, but a lot are, and there are three major forms I'm going to go over. And if you want, you could go right online and pull up PDFs of these forms to go over with me as I'm going over them. The first form is going to be the 3508S, and this is the most simple form of the three. It's for people that receive loan amounts of $50,000 or less for the PPP. Basically, all that is on this application. At the very top, you're filling out your business information, the name, the address, the EIN, email address, business phone number. Right below that, you fill out some information about the loan. So the loan number from SBA, the lender loan number for the PPP, which would be provided to you by the bank or whoever ended up lending the money, the PPP loan amount, the disbursement date or the date that you received the loan from the lender, the amount of employees you had at the time of the application or right before you actually received the loan, and then the amount of employees at the time of filling out the forgiveness application. And then if you apply for the EIDL, there's a section where it's asking for the amount. That was the grant portion. I have another video about that. And then also the EIDL application number if it applies to you. Right below that, there's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points that you have to initial by. And then at the very bottom, you just sign, print, and date. Now, the only point I'm going to go over for the statements that you have to initial by is the very first one. That's the most confusing. A lot of my clients have had trouble understanding this, and even accountants or co-workers with me, we had some trouble trying to figure this out at first because the wording is so weird. I'm just going to read it as it is on the paper. Again, this is the very first point, right under the authorized representative of the borrower certifies to all of the below by initialing next to each one. So the very first one states, the dollar amount for which forgiveness is requested does not exceed the principal amount of the PPP loan. So that's self-explanatory. And then it goes on to say, was used to pay costs that are eligible for forgiveness, which includes payroll costs to retain employees, business mortgage interest payments, business rent or lease payments, or business utility payments. So this is essentially telling you that the loan amount, you're verifying that the loan amount was used for the eligible cost that I just went over. And then it goes on to say, includes payroll costs equal to at least 60% of the forgiveness amount. So again, this is pretty simple. It's just telling you that at least 60% of the loan amount would have had to be used towards payroll costs in order for the full amount to be forgiven. This is where it gets complicated. So next it goes on saying, and this is still under the very first statement that you're initialing, if a 24-week covered period applies, that it does not exceed 2.5 months worth of 2019 compensation for any owners, employee, or self-employed individual, and that's capped at $20,833 per self-employed or per individual owner. And then it goes on to say if the borrower has elected an 8-week covered period that does not exceed 8 weeks worth of the 2019 compensation for any owner, employee, or self-employed individual, capped at $15,385 per individual. Now, I know that's confusing just reading it as is, like I said, so I have an Excel sheet up. I'm going to go over these how you would calculate this and basically just kind of summarize these caps to you and how this works. So we're going to start with the owner caps. So if you're the owner of a business, You are capped, if you're using a 24-week period, you're capped at $20,833. $20,833. And if you're using an 8-week covered period, you're capped at $15,385. Now, the calculation works like this. You would take your 2019 net profit, and you would do that by just pulling up your 2019 tax return. If you're incorporated, you're looking at the business return and you're looking at the net profit. You're going to take that number. And if you're not incorporated, you know, if you have a business, it's most likely going to be on Schedule C of your 1040. And same thing, you'd look at the net profit on the bottom of that form. So you would take the 2019 net profit from either the business return or Schedule C on your 1040, and you divide that amount by 52 weeks. You do that because there's 52 weeks in a year, and that's going to give you your average weekly income as an owner. Once you have that number, again, if you're using the 24-week covered period, you're going to multiply it by 10, which is the 2.5 months. So just for an example, just so we make sure you guys understand, we're gonna just pick a number. So hypothetically speaking, we're gonna say that the 2019 net profit from the business return is $300,000. So the way the calculation would go is you would take that $300,000 divided by 52 weeks, and then you would take that number multiplied by 10. The total you should get if you're using the $300,000 is $57,692. Now, because the cap is per individual owner is $20,833, we can't use the 57. We're gonna have to use the cap of $20,833. Let's see. Same thing over an 8-week period. So 2019 net profit from the business income for the owner is $300,000. You would take that divided by 52 weeks again to give you your average weekly income, and then you would take that number and multiply it by 8 weeks versus the 10 weeks. And then you get 46, when you calculate that, you get, let's see, $46,154. And again, that passes the cap for the 8-week period, which is the $15,385. So in this scenario, you would use the cap again for the forgiveness amount. Okay. Now I'm going to use a different number just for a different example. Instead of the profit being $300,000 from the 2019 return, let's say that the profit's $50,000. You would take that $50,000, divide by 52. That gives you your average weekly income as an owner. You would take that number and multiply it by the 10 weeks if you're using the 24-week covered period. And if you do that, you get a total of $9,615. Now, since this is lower than the cap of the $20,833, you're going to go with the $9,615 with this example. And then again, we're going to do same thing, $50,000 net profit from 2019, divide that by 52 to get your average weekly income as an owner, and then you multiply that by 8 versus the 10, that gives you $7,692. And again, that is lower than the cap of the $15,385, so you would use the $7,000 in this case. Now for individuals, that's the cap for owner per individual owner of a company. Now if we're talking about just regular employees of a company, their wages are capped at $100,000, and you use pretty much the same calculation, but instead of the 10 weeks for the 24-week covered period, you would just use 24 weeks. So for an individual, you would take $100,000 because that's the cap, you know, that's the most, that's the salary cap for individuals. You would take that, divide by 52, and multiply that by 24. So the cap for an individual is $46,154. Again, example, say over a 24-week period, a particular employee that you're trying to calculate this for, Over 24 weeks, their total wages over the 24-week covered period, let's say, is $50,000. Because that $50,000 exceeds the $46,154 limit, you would use the $46,000. You wouldn't use the $50,000. Now, on the other hand, let's say over a 24-week covered period, that this particular employee's wages total $25,000. Because it doesn't pass the cap of the $46,000, you would go with the $25,000. And then same thing with the 8-week. If you're doing an 8-week covered period, it's just $100,000 divided by 52, multiplied by 8 instead of 24, and that gives you the $15,385 cap for individuals that are just regular employees. This is the non-owner caps. So again, with this example, if you're using an 8-week covered period and over an 8-week period, a particular employee's wages total, let's just say $20,000, that $20,000 passes the $15,000 cap. So you would have to go with the cap of $15,385 for that individual. As far as the amount that applies to them, that can be forgiven. And then on the other hand, if their wages for that 8-week period were less than the cap, then you would just go with the lesser number of the two. I hope that makes it easier. This, it's really hard to wrap your head around. But those are the calculations, and if you pull out your calculator and use those examples, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But other than that, on this 3508S, you just fill in the information I said. You fill in the business information, the PPP loan information, and then you initial your name by those different points. Again, that first point was the hardest one to wrap your head around. You just make sure that you're applying those limits and caps and that you're not including any amounts to be forgiven that surpass those caps based on the calculations I showed you. And you could initial that first point. The rest are just, very self-explanatory. I'm not going to sit here and read each one, but basically that you use the money for what it was intended. It's, not being fraudulently used, and that you're filling out this application correctly and not fraudulently. Then at the very bottom, you sign, print, name, date, and that's it for the 3508S. Now, if you get into the 3508EZ, and this would be for loan amounts greater than $50,000, there's not much more to it, but there's a little bit more. So same exact thing. The top parts, you fill in the business information, business name, business address, EIN. Below that is the PPP information. You put the loan number from the SBA, the lender loan number, the PPP amount, yada yada. And then right below that, same exact thing. There's those points that you have to initial off by, those different statements. And again, that first one, it's the same thing on the 3508EZ. Goes over the caps, and I simplified that for you, and hopefully you guys understand that now. The only additional things here is there is a section called forgiveness amount calculation on the 3508EZ, and it's actually right above the parts where you initial beside all the different points and statements. So with this, under the forgiveness amount calculation on the 3508EZ, line 1 is payroll costs. So you're just putting total payroll costs using those caps and calculations that I showed you per employee and per individual owner of that company. Line 2 would be business mortgage interest payments. Line 3 would be business rent or lease payments. Line 4 would be business utility payments. Line 5, you're adding the amounts from line 1, 2, 3, and 4. So essentially it's your total eligible cost for the PPP. Line 6 is the PPP loan amount, so the amount you received. Line 7, you're taking line 1 and dividing it by 0.6, or the 60%. And so basically the payroll cost divided by 0.6. And then line 8 is the forgiveness amount, or the amount you want forgiven, and you come up with that by taking the smallest of lines 5, 6, and 7. So basically the way it works out is your eligible costs are either going to be less or more, than the PPP loan amount, and you're taking the lesser of those numbers. So if you cover your PPP loan amount, the most you could take is the amount you received for the PPP loan. That's the most that could be forgiven. You can't have more than what you took out forgiven, obviously. And that's all this calculates for you. With a particular client that I just did who had a little more than $50,000 in loans, we did the 3508 EZ for him, filled it out. Just like I said, and then we also included, we did the 24-week period for him because he didn't have all the loan amount covered over the 8-week period. So we used the 24-week period and included, on top of filling out the 3508 EZ and turning that into his lender, we included 24 weeks worth of payroll reports as backup, and that was essentially it. Again, each lender is different with what they're going to require, but this is just kind of to help you guys understand how to fill out these forms. But you're going to want to turn in stuff accordingly based on what the lender requires. And then the last form is the 3508, and that's the most complex form. I'm not going to get into it, but it has everything that the 3508S has on top of what the 3508 EZ has, and then some additional information and calculations you have to get in. Most of my viewers, I'm guessing, aren't going to be required to fill out the 3508. I'm assuming that it's either going to be the 3508 EZ or the 3508S that applies to you. So I hope this video was very helpful for you guys. Also, check me out on Clarity. I have an account set up. If any of you guys want help filling out this application, set up an appointment on Clarity, and I'd be more than happy to help you guys kind of fill this out and get it all done. Thanks, and I'll see you guys soon.